This corn stand was a 100% corn stand. I mean, it was probably one of the best stands that I've had in 5 years here. And then we had a 2-day event where a surge tide came in with a full moon, and it just destroyed this field.
Wendell Meekins farms 1,100 acres in Dorchester County. He's experiencing what many farmers in Maryland's low-lying counties are facing: a changing landscape that's altering how and what they farm.
And we've been dealing with this problem for a long, long time. We're in a low-lying, flat area near the bay, many tributaries off of the bay here that we're trying to farm around.
With nearly 12,000 miles of shoreline, the Chesapeake Bay region is particularly vulnerable to rising sea levels. Frequently, entire communities have become susceptible to ever-increasing extreme tidal surges.
People sort of talk about climate change as if it's something that's going to happen, but if you talk to somebody here, it's happening already. It has been happening.
Kate Tully is the director of the University of Maryland's Agroecology Lab. Her research explores the intersection of agriculture and ecology.
So this is the area where the flood occurred.
Oh, yeah. That's like a classic sign of saltwater intrusion there. Did you plant that then?
This was planted, it had the same stand. This was planted at 32,000 population, 30,000 seeds to the acre, and it was 100% germinated stand.
So this whole thing, you had planted it exactly the same, and then you can see almost perfectly here where the salt has cut in. What we're seeing here is saltwater intrusion, which is the landward movement of sea salts. And as those salts move in, a lot of our traditional crops like corn and soy, they really can't tolerate high salt levels. And so because of that, they're basically being burned, and then you end up with a field like this.
Corn and soybean fields that are only inches above sea level rely on drainage ditches to disperse stormwater. But during extreme tides, the surge can breach the buffer zones designed to minimize runoff and flood crops in a brackish sea.
We're losing so much yield potential because if you look right here, you know, this is naturally what this field should have yielded. This is what we should have harvested off of this crop, you know, with the rains and the fertilization that we put in. And as we got into the tide cycle, that corn just dwindled down and the plant just decreased in size until you fall off to, you can see the decrease in yield potential until you just fell off into nothing.
When traditional crops like corn and soybean can't survive a rising tide, many farmers look to alternative crops. But that's easier said than done.
Salt tolerance is such a complex genetic trait. So it's one thing to germinate in the salty soil, then it's another thing to grow vegetatively like this, and then it's another thing to actually reproduce.
Kate and her team will take measurements of the flooded area, collecting soil samples every 5 meters at varying depths. These core samples will give them a soil salinity profile.
So here you can see classic examples of a redox features in anaerobic soil. So the gray soil has been depleted of iron, and the red is wherever iron concentrations occur, usually along pore spaces or roots that have dug into the soil. So this is a very, classic example of you could almost call it a wetland soil, and it shows how wet that these soils actually get, especially at this depth.
The soil samples will go back to the lab for salt content analysis. But this initial site survey reveals a hard fact that many farmers and landowners will have to come to terms with: that saltwater intrusion is here to stay, and to possibly make some challenging choices.
There's a history of cultivation in Maryland, and especially in Dorchester and Somerset counties. People have been practicing agriculture for a very long time. And so it's really kind of heart-wrenching in some ways to say, well, this field isn't going to produce corn, and it's probably not going to produce sorghum or any other grain crop again. So we have to sort of think about, okay, but how else can we manage these lands?
One strategy suggests that establishing natural zones in flood-prone areas can provide landowners with other options.
If you think of it as, okay, well, now I'm going to allow some of the native species to grow here. That's great habitat. Now I can do some more deer hunting or other waterfowl hunting, and you kind of shift your perspective, then these landscapes can look productive again.
The 54 soil and 6 water samples taken by Kate's team confirm what was visually apparent. The results showed moderate to extreme soil salinity, higher than many fields sampled in Dorchester County. For Wendell, it's information that could determine how or if he farms these fields.
It has to be a profitability standpoint, because I'm coming in and I'm putting in all these inputs into these crops and I only get a third of the yield. It's not worth doing for me.
If it were my land, I would feel devastated by seeing my way of life completely changed. And yet, that's the reality in some of these farms.
Thanks for watching Maryland Farm and Harvest. We hope you liked the video. Make sure to subscribe so you won't miss out on future videos. To learn more about our show and watch full episodes, check out mpt.org/farm or just click the link in the description.